there. If you're new here, thanks for stopping by. Every Friday, we sit down and chat about a case that we feel has an important message that can help others in similar situations, save a life, change mindsets, or even contribute in changing laws. But before we dive in, here's a little side note. Every bit of information, images, or footage was compiled from what's available online, or if we were lucky in some cases, from the very people closest to the case. All opinions expressed are our own. We mean absolutely no disrespect. So don't click out and stay a while. So whilst we were researching the case, we came across another case that brought the similarities of victimology, the criminal aspect of it, quite, especially the criminal, eerily similar to one another. And we've just reviewed the case of Jodi and Travis Alexander. We couldn't not mention this case, unfortunately. Because Jodi had become so notorious in her case, people were, not just in America, but the whole world watched as her lies unfolded, as her trial went on, and all the things she was doing, like she was singing and pirouetting and all of that. So she became so notorious across the whole world. At one point, they're called the most hated woman in America, and she became one of the most notorious killers of the 21st century. This is important to know. Why? Because of what she's done and how this case unfolded, she almost became some sort of a benchmark for other crimes of comparison for other similar crimes. So it goes without saying that now that we've reviewed Jodi's case, let's look at another example of a case that was very, very closely compared to Jodi's. And this happens to be the case of Shayna Hubers, a woman whose own criminal behavior echoes Jodi's own, even to people she knew. So what's the story behind it? Shayna was a educated woman. She was a psychology student, but she was convicted in 2012 for killing her, we're going to say boyfriend, but that's a bit of a loaded title, to be honest, and you're going to find out why. But we'll say at this point, her boyfriend, Ryan Poston. It came to light that she was absolutely obsessed with Jodi's case. Jodi's conviction, when she was sent to prison for life, was in 2013. She was convicted in 2015. So she had plenty of time to take notes. And apparently she was so obsessed. She went as far as taking notes during the airings of Jodi's trial. A woman named Holly Nevins, who at one time shared a cell with Shayna, said, "When we were in jail together, Jodi Arias's case was a big thing. So anytime that would come on the TV, she would just write down every single detail of that case." She was so wrapped up in her case, Niven continues, comparing herself with Jodi. While the thought of Hubers' fascination with Arias might be unsettling, it's not entirely unfounded, since the case piggybacked off each other. Both Arias and Hubers were charged with murdering their respective on and off boyfriend, if you might say. And strangely enough, the similarities didn't end there. Both Hubers and Arias attempted to evade imprisonment by claiming they had acted in self-defense, despite the fact that the physical evidence proved otherwise. The homicides were both reportedly violent to an extreme degree, and both involved a gun and a knife. Like Arias, who exhibited increasingly bizarre behavior after her arrest for the murder of Travis, among which included doing a handstand and singing a rendition of Holy Night to herself while left alone in the interrogation room, Hubers also did the same. Simply put, she acted so bizarrely. Hubers reportedly joked about giving Ryan a nose job that he so wanted, in reference to the shooting, while speaking to officers, performing pirouettes, and even singing the song Amazing Grace. Even weirder, Hubers and Arias each had not only one trial, but two, although Arias's was done after a mistrial in her sentencing phase, and Hubers was sentenced twice, the second in 2018. However, it looks like, as chilling as these cases are, Hubers and Arias have one final thing in common. Both received life imprisonment for their crimes. And now we're going to welcome Roger, who joins us. Roger is a permanent fixture of the team who joins us on the roundtable discussion part of our show. And Roger's going to talk us a little bit more through the victimology and the various aspects of the crimes themselves and the criminals. Welcome back, Roger.
Hello again. There's a couple of other things just related to similarities in terms of their trial. Both of the criminals tried to claim psychologically things similar to, like, they had PTSD relating to childhood sexual assaults. They both had lawyers trying to argue for them as part of their defense that they had, like, a borderline personality disorder, and both of them also attempted some form of quite excessive character assassination of their victim at the trial.
You've heard a little bit of the Shayna Hubers. We're not going to go in details. We're not going to dive, because that's not the case we're talking about necessarily today. We just wanted to compare the similarities, to show the similarities, and to also tell you that, Jodi's now become such a level of notoriety that she's been used as a benchmark for killers. But what's interesting to me is that she was, Shayna, I'm talking about Shayna Hubers, she was taking notes while she was in jail, awaiting trial, taking notes over what Jodi was saying, her behavior, etc. So now what I'm wondering is, when she went on her own trial, did she sort of mimic some of Jodi's behavior? I'm not really au fait with whether she used this as how do I say that, as a learning experience. Yeah,
I think it's, if you're just talking about the trial, then there's clearly she's aware of Jodi, and there is an influence and a kind of flavour that comes out in her behaviour, and it's not surprising because you see also in her past, when in the build-up to her crime, one of the things she used to do in relation to Ryan's ex-girlfriend was compare herself to her and literally go up to people and say, "But aren't I prettier than her?"
Yeah, think of the level of narcissism. Both killers here are quite narcissistic, but they have a clear difference, you might say, Roger?
Yeah, just on one other weird comment of Shayna's, when it comes down to comparisons, another one she's quite famous for is comparing her IQ as to being the same as Einstein's. So there's comparing of herself to other people, but then there's also the narcissism involved in it.
Yeah.
And in terms of the two criminals, this is actually quite an interesting topic, because there's kind of like these four psychological ways in which people get described. There's the psychopath, which you could summarize as being somebody who's born with a certain defect. There's the sociopath, who develops the defects in their mind because of the way they are brought up and the pressures they're under. Then there is what they kind of refer to as the narcissistic personality disorder and the borderline personality disorder. Boiled down, the difference between the narcissistic personality disorder and the borderline personality disorder, in its simplest form, is to say that the borderline personality disorder is just a more vulnerable, potentially more volatile version of the narcissist. If that is kind of like the descriptions of the different psychological profiles that people refer them to, first of all, there's a caveat that a lot of mental health professionals will say that these ways of trying to define whether a person is this type of person or that one were not created with the criminal justice system in mind. They were created more from the doctor's perspective of trying to work out what a person's problems are, so then you can find the right way to treat them. So when they get used in a courtroom setting, particularly this kind of narcissist personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, are they, aren't they, do they tick enough boxes, you're playing with a device that wasn't really built for that purpose, which can complicate how you view the criminal in that courtroom setting. What's maybe more important to look at is what really are the real psychological points that make these people so different. And I think for me, the most glaringly obvious one is the lack of empathy that either of them had for their victim. During the interview, during the trial, during media coverage, there's virtually zero of anything shown resembling remorse towards the victim. In Jodi's case, the only time that I saw that she shows some form of remorse was when she apologised for being caught in a lie. And that kind of leads to another difference between the two of them, even though they're quite similar psychologically. It's the way in which they manipulate people. Jodi appears to be a vastly more polished individual in how she can lie and manipulate people, whilst Shayna's more preferred route seems to be, if you look into her background, she was known for being dramatic.
Mm-hmm. But let me ask you this, Roger. Do you think that when she did have remorse, or when she was showing that sign of remorse, saying, "I'm sorry that I was caught in a lie," do you think that she apologized because she lied or because she got caught?
Probably as a device, because she got caught.
So you think she was continuing to try and manipulate?
So it wasn't, so it's a continuing manipulation, it's not genuine remorse. One of the interesting things I was watching was there was a number of these experts on body language, and some of them had pointed out, and this is how they were pointing out how smooth a liar Jodi is. You can see whenever you give her something she likes, like attention that is positive, her face would kind of leak a sign of pleasure, like a slight smile. Her eyes might flicker briefly. And she also showed complete neutrality when she is just reciting facts. But normally if someone is faced with something that they are remorseful for, they will show in their body language some sign of remorse, which was just not there in Jodi's case. And a lot of times when she was, and this is another sign of why she's such a smooth operator, if you like, is when she was put on the spot about like difficult questions, instead of answering them, she would divert away with a long story with a lot of details about something that just doesn't relate to the question that was asked of her.
You think that was like...
It's another form of manipulation.
It's a ploy to try and divert from the original question so she doesn't actually have to answer that question.
Yeah, it's her controlling, and this goes back to the psychology, it's trying to control the perception of something.
Mm-hmm. What's interesting is something you talked about, you touched on earlier, and I think we also need to sort of mention this. During the time when Jodi claimed that Travis was abusive, she also accused him of being a pedophile. Pedophile in the sense that he she accused him. Now that's her saying.
Well, she said that one day she walked into his house and he didn't know that she was there because, she would often let herself in. She came in and she saw him pleasuring himself to a picture of a little boy.
Yeah. Following on to that, she further provided letters as if it was evidence that Travis was admitting to guilt of such offences. Now, when they analysed this evidence, it was proven to be forged. We're going to speculate and say that Jodi wrote them and made that up, or had someone write them. But of course, it is unfounded that Travis was exhibiting such behaviours. I don't think it even came up into the investigation, so it's something that we shouldn't give too much light to because it's
at the end of the day, she was just trying to hurt his reputation and hurt his character.
Yeah, I think that both women did that, didn't they?
It's another expression of them trying to control how things are perceived, not just how something, not what happened, but how it happened and who each person is. Because one thing that both of them love to do non-stop is talk about their relationship going forward, and they're quite happy to do it. And they will talk at great length because it gives them, it's only their voice, and it gives them full control of the perception of what happened and the background. And
but here's one thing that whilst we were researching a little bit of the Shayna Hubers case, here's the thing that's interesting. When you compare both of their upbringing, Jodi, as you have heard before, says she didn't have a really good family life. She didn't get along so well with her parents, and she ended up moving to her grandparents, and from there she was drifting a little bit from relationship to relationship, etc. And Shayna is a complete contrast to that.
Complete opposite, a very privileged upbringing. She finds everything she does to be very easy.
She was an A student, always at the top of her class, a bit dramatic when it comes to relationship, like boyfriend-girlfriend
which
things.
is apparently a similarity between the two of them. Both of them, when it came down to their relationships at that younger age, are known for having
Drama,
yeah.
But what's interesting is that Shayna comes from a more privileged background, a more sound type of family life, if you may say, and she goes on to study psychology out of all things. Ryan was an attorney. He was a young attorney. He had just opened his own law firm, and at some point he made it clear to Shayna that he did not want to be in this relationship with her, that they were done, that she should leave him alone. But she manipulated him into staying, guilt-tripped him is the right, into staying into the relationship, right? So he even went and said that to his friends, how do you break up with someone who won't let you break up with them? It was to that level. But he made it clear there was no open door left, there was no friends with benefits. There was no such thing in that regards.
And so that's the biggest difference between...
That's one of the biggest difference between the victimology, because where we see that Travis left that door slightly open.
Travis is going to his friends and saying, hey, she's stalking me, she's in my bank account, she's in my emails.
Yeah.
But still having a relationship with her that is friends with benefits.
Exactly.
And then Ryan, from what I understand, doesn't want anything to do with her.
No, he knew. He even went as far as saying to his friend, she's crazy. Don't want to have anything to do with her.
Yeah.
And he made that clear. One of the similarities, though, between both victims is neither of them reported it to the police. We speculated as to why we think Travis wouldn't have reported it to the police. But Ryan, who was an attorney, who knows the ins and outs of the law, and he knows what was available for him to do with regards to that, he never reported it.
No. I mean, just when we talk about how do you extract from these cases lessons to be learned that you can potentially use for your own benefit or the benefit of others, then just to finish on the kind of criminal side thing very quickly, if the two women you could say had narcissistic personality disorders, well, that's pretty hard to say. Is the person I'm in a relationship, is that person dangerous? And it's hard to spot that with the narcissistic qualities. But the one thing why we mentioned the lack of empathy, that is potentially one red flag that you can look for in somebody who could be a dangerous stalker, is just that, as a red flag, is that sheer lack of empathy for other people. Like someone who is, like we talked about in the first one, like the criminal who went after the other prosecution lawyers, someone who does not think about consequences, who doesn't care what their action or harm their actions cause to other people. That one's a clear red flag on that side.
But here's the thing, I'm going to throw that out there, and we'll take, for example, the case of Jodi, where we clearly see that she is a fabulously polished liar. Don't you think that someone like Jodi could have faked empathy? When you meet someone for the first time and you start dating, you don't necessarily know the ins and outs and the making, the core of a person.
No,
right?
You could live with someone for many, many years and still not know exactly who they are or what will come up in their personality.
Yeah, and I think, I dare say, if you're a polished liar and you're used to doing that because you've been doing it, you're narcissistic, you've been doing this for years and years and years, and you don't want the person that you're in a relationship with, or your partner, your husband, whatever it is, to notice such red flags, especially if you're smart enough to get away with lying and
manipulating.
It's a good question, but there's kind of an answer to this.
So we might say that someone who's that well polished in making up lies, or you're narcissistic, you're smart enough, you've been doing it for years, and if you're holding on to that relationship that you want to keep, I dare say that they'll be polished enough or smart enough and manipulative enough to blind the person they're with as to not see the red flags. Now, this is important for us to talk about, because we keep talking about watch out for the red flags. Sometimes we've heard people say, I never knew this person was like that. I never knew that person would do that.
Well, don't you think it's because those who are being manipulated don't always know that they are being manipulated?
That's true. Yeah.
There's partially an answer to this one, and that lies in the old adage of actions speak louder than words. So you can fake tears and you can say things, but when somebody that you're with is actively going to other people that you have relationships, friends, family or whatever, and they are getting aggressive with them, or maybe vandalizing their property or crossing boundaries and social norms, then that's one pretty clear indicator. And one of the reasons you can kind of say for that is, if you're talking about the psychopath and sociopath again, is some of these people who have these mental conditions, they don't get fight or flight triggered in the brain the same way that normal people do, which is part the reason why they aren't afraid of consequences, because they don't get triggered, which is why they cross the boundary.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this, though. Do you think that this crossing boundaries, do you think it goes into all kinds of relationships they have, kind of leaks into them, or do you think it's with their partners or with a specific person?
I think it tends to be quite general, because how can the brain select between one case or another? And it's, as we've seen in some cases, it does tend to be general. They don't tend to distinguish between crossing a boundary with you, crossing a boundary with your family, with your friends, with the defense lawyer, some guy in the street.
As long as it serves, I think, as long as it serves their purpose. Do you know what I mean? Like, if they've got something to gain out of it, it doesn't matter who you are, if that makes any sense. If it serves a purpose, then they're going to do it.
Plus, another hallmark is this sense of entitlement.
Mm-hmm.
As long as in their mind, if they are coming up with a narrative towards you that is coming out of their mind that paints them as the hero or the victim, then they're always just finding a way to justify their boundary crossing.
Yeah, we're going to be running short on time. I just need to bring up another tidbit of information about the case. And that's a very interesting thing for us to talk about. Shayna was smart, a student, psychology student. She liked to brag about how smart she was, right? Yet, I don't know if any of you have seen her, I think you've seen her interview, interrogation with the police. She was asking some fairly dumb questions, such as, when you go to jail, are you allowed to take a shower or do you get really, really, really dirty?
I suspect some of those questions, though, were just to try and elicit a response from the police, because the police were not supposed to be talking to her because she'd asked for a lawyer.
She came into the interrogation, she immediately asked for a lawyer. She went on to talk. For how many hours?
3 hours, I think it was. Virtually non-stop. The police had to keep swapping over.
No, it was longer than that, I think.
I think it was 3 hours, and at least initially.
They had to keep taking shifts.
Do you think she was manipulating, though, the police?
That's the question. Then she also asked, am I allowed to take my phone with me?
Yeah, I think there's two things here. One, it's to both of their personalities, her and Jodi. You can tell that they get off on attention. The police aren't supposed to be talking to her that time, so she's trying to elicit a response. Another interesting thing I'd heard one of the psychologists say was, once you take a person, imagine you've committed that crime and you place them in that room, imagine it's you, you're feeling some form of internal pressure. How do you let that out? And if you're the type of person who has one of these personality disorders that are narcissistic and grandiose and things like that, then you can almost logically start to understand why they would start to act in this way when they maybe feel pressured. Mm-hmm. Like one babbling constantly or singing or doing handstands.
They're self-soothing.
In a sense, they're letting... It's almost like a way of letting you could argue it's almost like a way of letting the pressure out.
It doesn't reduce the level of creepiness, though. I mean, okay, Jodi was singing "Oh Holy Night." The other one was singing, what was that?
Amazing Grace.
Amazing Grace, right? And then at some point she broke into, I did it. And the worst thing is, she knew there's camera in the interrogation room. It's being filmed. She knew it was being filmed. She looked straight at it.
They both did.
It was their own personal reality show, their 5 minutes of fame.
A bit more than that. That's part of the problem, that they've been both given more media attention than they should do, like a Bundy.
I think Jodi more than Shayna, but...
Yeah, one's the original and the other is seen as a copycat, mostly on the surface because of her behaviour in that police interview room.
Careful, Roger, she might come after you for calling her a copycat.
Well, I also think that it was because of the religion aspect with Jodi.
Yeah.
Especially with such a strict belief system that the Mormons have.
And on the last bit that I want to touch on, because this was something we discussed, we even joked about it during our review of the case, and I feel the need that it's important for us to mention it here so that the communication doesn't get misunderstood or taken for something that it's not. When Jodi claimed that, that her parents, she had such a hard life that her parents beat her with a wooden spoon, and both Rachel and I sort of laughed about it and said, which one of us hasn't? We are not in any way trying to promote corporal punishment. Roger and I have children together. We do not believe in corporal punishment either, because we are of the belief system, even though we're from a generation that does, but we are of the belief system that it achieves nothing good. I don't think it teaches anything good.
It just makes you bitter.
Yeah, but not only does it make you bitter, but it also teaches you how to be a bit more sneaky about what you're doing so you not get caught, you know? So we believe, both Roger and I believe in quite an open style parenting where we want to enable our children to have a voice, to speak their mind, to voice even their discontent when they have some. Sometimes they do it a little too often.
Yeah, they most definitely do that.
Yes, but it's to promote an openness, because at the end of the day, when our children reach the age of teenage years, we would like them to come to us with issues. We don't want to be the kind of parents where our kids feel we're not open enough to understand or hear the issues that that they have. Unfortunately, all too often parents close themselves up to that, because they say, what could you be experiencing so bad in your little life? You're not nearly as experienced or old enough to have experienced anything. It doesn't matter the level of issues that that you face in your life, whether you're old or young. For example, a little kid that is being bullied at school might not feel they can come to you, because you might say, oh, that's nothing. So I think it's very important. Openness is quite important, and I cannot stress enough that we do not believe in corporal punishment. There are other ways to teach your children, to discipline them. It is a hard road. It is a huge mountain to climb.
I think it makes more of an impression on kids these days if you take their iPads and stuff, screens away.
Oh, yeah.
Do we have any closing statements on the case, or...?
There's still one other lesson to be learned from the victimology side of things. And that's, even though the two victims are slightly different, and that can be kind of summed up politely as not wanting to be a contributing factor in your own demise. So in the case of Travis, it's the fact that he's got these mixed motivations. He's been brought up a certain way, with certain set of beliefs in relation to the church, a set of beliefs in relation to like his career, and a certain set of feelings and urges sexually, and the three conflict. And when he meets Jodi, she seems like she could be a solution to it, but he can't let her go, even though some of the things he's doing don't meet with his spiritual beliefs. So they're still kind of back and forth, and that's a contributing factor. In the case of Ryan, it's different, because he seems to do everything right. He tells her repeatedly, no, you tells her in texts, no, he tells her verbally, no. When she won't accept no, he's even telling her that he's only with her because she's shaming him. And one of the things that kind of comes out is, perhaps the lesson learned is, once you reach a point that behaviour has reached clear stalking levels, that you have to make the cut clear, definitive, and then you have to start trying to enforce it. Because that appears to have been Ryan's mistake, as in he plateaued. He did everything he thought he could do, but then he plateaued. He didn't, even as a lawyer, he didn't go one step forward and say to the police...
charges,
Yeah.
So basically, call the police. Get the police involved, get the law involved.
Keep evidence, keep a log, keep evidence as much as you can. But make sure that whilst you're keeping this evidence, keeping that log, you also shut that door fully. And on this note, we bid you farewell. So long, until next time.